It was supposed to be a harmless joke. That's what I told myself. Anyway, we were at a friend's birthday dinner, a cozy restaurant, candlelight flickering against wine glasses, laughter echoing across the long table. My husband, Ethan, was sitting beside me, quiet as usual. He's never been the loud one in any crowd, calm, composed, the kind of man who listens more than he speaks. I used to love that about him, but lately, that calm had started to feel like distance. So when my friend Lily nudged me and whispered something about men who never notice when their wives dress up, I laughed, too loud. "Oh, tell me about it," I said, grinning as the table turned our way. "Ethan still hasn't realized I got my hair cut 3 days ago. I could come home with blue hair and he'd just ask what's for dinner." Everyone burst into laughter. I felt a twinge of guilt, but the attention felt good. Someone else added, "He's probably just scared to say the wrong thing." And I played along. "Oh, please," I said. "He doesn't say anything." The laughter grew louder. Ethan just smiled politely, eyes fixed on his plate. I caught that look, the faint, tired smile of a man who'd heard enough but didn't want to make a scene. And still, I didn't stop. I made one more joke about how at least the dog listens to me, and everyone roared again. For a moment, I felt like the star of the table. But when the laughter died down, Ethan finally looked up, not at the group, at me. His voice was calm, quiet enough that everyone had to lean in to hear. "You know," he said, "it's funny how much you talk about being ignored, when the truth is, that's exactly what you've done to me for years." The words landed like a pin drop in the middle of a roaring crowd. The room went silent. Even the clinking glasses stopped. My heart started pounding. And suddenly, the candlelight felt too bright, the air too heavy. "Ethan," I started, but he held up his hand, still calm, still steady. "No, it's fine," he said. "I get it. Everyone needs a laugh. I just didn't realize my marriage was the punchline." He stood up then, not angrily, just quietly, and excused himself from the table. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," he said, before walking out. No shouting, no drama, just a sentence in silence that said more than I ever could. The laughter that had filled the table moments earlier evaporated. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds after Ethan left. 30 seconds that felt like a lifetime. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck, my hands trembling in my lap as everyone stared at me. Lily tried to lighten the tension with a nervous giggle. "He'll cool off," she murmured, but even she sounded unsure. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "He's just sensitive," I whispered, pretending it was nothing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't nothing. His words kept echoing in my mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. "That's exactly what you've done to me for years." I made some excuse to leave the dinner early. The drive home felt longer than usual. The house was dark when I got there. His car wasn't in the driveway. I sat in the living room, still in my dress, staring at the clock. Midnight came, then 1, still no sign of him. For the first time in a long time, I had space to think, really think, and the truth hit hard. Ethan had always been steady, dependable, the kind of man who noticed little things, even when he didn't say much. I was the one who changed. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped seeing him as a person and started treating him like background noise in my own story. I thought about all the times he'd reached out, small gestures I'd brushed off, the times he'd asked, "You okay?" And I'd replied, "I'm fine," without even looking up from my phone. The dinners he'd planned that I canceled because I was too tired. The mornings he'd made coffee and left it by my side, only for me to leave it untouched. He didn't ignore me. I ignored him. The weight of guilt was suffocating. When Ethan finally came home around 2 in the morning, I was still sitting there. He looked exhausted, not from anger, from disappointment. He didn't yell or demand explanations. He just said, "You embarrass me, Anna," in front of everyone. "I know," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "I didn't mean to." He cut me off gently. "You never mean to, but you always do." He walked past me, toward the guest room. That quiet hurt more than any fight ever could. The silence between us felt like a wall I didn't know how to break. That night, I lay awake, realizing that sometimes the words that destroy love aren't cruel or loud. They're the careless ones we laugh through, thinking they mean nothing until they cost us everything. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the shower running in the guest bathroom, not our room. That's when I knew the wound was deeper than I wanted to admit. Ethan was a quiet man, but his silence was a language of its own. When he spoke less, it meant he was hurting more. He left early for work, skipping breakfast. No note, no goodbye, just absence. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, the one he'd always pulled out for me with a small smile. That tiny act of courtesy, something I'd once taken for granted, now felt like a memory from another life. Days passed, and the distance between us grew like an invisible fog. He still did everything, fixed things around the house, paid bills, kept routines, but the warmth was gone. He was polite, distant, and heartbreakingly calm. And in that calm, I saw a man who had finally stopped trying. It wasn't until the next family gathering that I realized just how much I'd broken something in him. We were at my parents' anniversary dinner, surrounded by relatives, when my cousin joked about Anna always has the last word. Everyone laughed, except Ethan. He just looked at me with that same quiet sadness and said, "She always does, even when it costs her peace." The table fell silent again, just like that night weeks ago. But this time, the shame burned deeper. I didn't defend myself or laugh it off. I just looked down, feeling every ounce of regret I'd buried. After dinner, I found him standing outside, watching the city lights. I walked up and said softly, "You don't make jokes anymore." He turned to me, eyes tired. "There's nothing funny left between us, Anna. You took the humor out when you made me the punchline." That line broke me completely. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, truly sorry, but words felt empty now. Apologies couldn't erase years of belittling him, of making him feel invisible in the name of harmless jokes. That night, I finally said what I should have said long ago. "Ethan, I miss us. I miss the way you used to look at me." He looked at me one last time and whispered, "Then maybe you should have looked at me when I still did." And that was the night I realized, sometimes the moment you think you've won a laugh, you've already lost a life. Weeks passed after that night, and the silence between us became routine. We shared a house, not a life. Every morning, he'd leave early. Every night, I'd wait up, pretending I wasn't waiting. We didn't argue anymore, because there was nothing left to fight for. Just the sound of two people coexisting where love used to live. One evening, I came home to find one of his drawers empty. He hadn't left, but some of his things were gone. On the counter was a note in his handwriting. "I'm staying with Mark for a while. Don't call me unless it's important." No anger, no goodbye, just a sentence as precise as his silence. For days, I walked around the house like a ghost. His jacket still hung by the door. His mug still sat in the cabinet, untouched. But the warmth that once filled the space was gone. I realized that love doesn't always leave in storms. Sometimes it just walks away quietly when no one's paying attention. I started writing him letters, not to send, just to say what I couldn't say aloud. Pages filled with apologies, memories, the little moments I'd ignored. The smell of coffee on Sunday mornings, the way he used to hum when fixing things, the softness in his eyes when he looked at me before I made him stop looking. A month later, he came by to pick up the rest of his things. I stood by the doorway, heart pounding. He looked different, lighter, calmer, but also distant in a way that told me he'd already begun to move on. "I didn't want it to end like this," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long time, then sighed. "Neither did I, but endings don't always ask for permission." And then he was gone. The house felt emptier than ever, but also honest, stripped of noise, jokes, and pride. I sat alone in that silence, finally understanding that the worst kind of loneliness isn't being alone. It's realizing you were loved deeply, and you made that love feel small. Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone who loves you is laugh while they're breaking.